Hi. This is Vernita. I am the founder of SWAT, which is Survivors with a Testimony. We're coming today to talk to you about human trafficking and domestic violence. We have our host, Miss Angela, who's going to lead this conversation, along with some awesome people who have joined in to spread awareness about what human trafficking and domestic violence is. Domestic violence do affect our homes. It is a pandemic within a pandemic. Trafficking didn't stop when the pandemic started. Trafficking is when a person is a grave situation. So we're gonna let Miss Angela introduce herself to you and the rest of our panel.
Hey everyone, I am Angela Dudley and I'm a member of SWAT. I am the marketing director and I'm glad that everyone is up here with us so that we can bring awareness.
Hey,
Officer
good morning.
Vera.
Go ahead. Good morning. I'm Sergeant Viverette with Greenville Police Department. I've been with the police department for 27 years. I currently am the supervisor of the Special Victims Unit. We investigate a variety of crimes, including domestic violence, human trafficking, child abuse, um, and various other crimes.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sabrina Bristow Wiggins. I am currently a social worker and domestic violence advocate in Durham, North Carolina.
Miss Sabrina.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. My name is Sabrina
Yes.
Bristow Wiggins, and I am a social worker and domestic violence advocate in
Everyone
Durham, North
can hear you.
Carolina. Can you hear me?
They may not be able to hear you, but I think we can hear you.
Okay, my mic is on. It's not muted.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I need to lean in closer to the mic. That's it. All right. Sorry about that. This is new for me. I'm a social worker and domestic violence advocate in Durham, and my background is in child welfare and in criminal justice. I've worked with domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault survivors since the mid 1990s.
Well, I'm Roger Green Jr. I'm an author of the book The Journey of Living Day by Day, as well as a life
Elder
coach.
Green.
Yes, Roger Green, again, Roger Green Jr. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm an author of the book The Journey of Living Day by Day, as well as I am the youth pastor of Prayer and Deliverance Ministries here locally. And so I've seen firsthand some of the effects of human trafficking within some of the congregants of our church. And so it's something that is near and dear to my heart, as well as my mom is a domestic violence survivor, growing up in a home of domestic abuse. And so it's something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm grateful and honored to be on this panel. And so thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to talk about what human trafficking is. And when we look at the definition, it says trafficking in persons is a serious crime and a grave violation of human rights. Every year, thousands of men, women, and children fall into the hands of traffickers in their own countries and abroad. Almost every country in the world is affected by trafficking. There's a origin, transit, or destination for victims. So we're gonna lean right into because we have questions, for our local law enforcement officers. So we're gonna ask Officer Viverett some questions, and it's gonna be into the hands of Angela.
So, my question for you is, how does law enforcement determine the charge for human trafficking and prostitution? Officer, Sergeant Viverette.
Okay. So human trafficking, they both involve control. Prostitution is the act of participating in a sexual act for money. It's a a criminal act. It's a business deal where an individual, male or female, sells themselves for money. Human trafficking, on the other hand, it does involve the act of prostitution, but it also involves the control of that individual. It involves that person. So not only the act, but it also involves threats, the use of force, coercion, maybe even abduction, deception of that person who's participating in the act in order to control them and make them participate in the act of prostitution, or in some cases, labor trafficking, which we'll talk about later. And that's done to exploit that individual. They are being used. They are being made to basically modern day slavery, regardless of whether it's sex trafficking or whether it's labor trafficking. Those individuals are being coerced to participate in these things in order to benefit the trafficker.
So how do we recognize labor trafficking?
How do you recognize labor trafficking? Labor trafficking, let me see here. I have recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of, like we talked about, fraud, coercion, for the person's purposes, rather, to subject that person to involuntary servitude, bondage, slavery. And that's directly out of the United States Code of Federal Regulations. It's actually 22 U.S. Code 7102. And you recognize that you may have an individual who is, they're in the company of others, but they're not allowed to talk. They are constantly at a particular individual's beck and call. They perform a service of labor, but their means, they live in some cases, abject poverty. You see this a lot in agriculture communities, where individuals may be trafficked in from other countries to perform agricultural services. Now, that is not to say, and please everyone hear me, that is not to say that every farm or every agriculture business is participating in trafficking. That's not at all the case. But there are indicators. Is the person shy? Are they timid? Very submissive? Do they not want to speak for themselves? Are they always looking to a specific individual for answers or for direction on what they should or should not do? Are they juveniles? And this is true whether it's a labor trafficking or a sex trafficking situation. You know, is that person a juvenile? Who's caring for this child? If you have a person who's obviously under the age of 18, where are their parents? Those are some of the things, some of the red flags, if you will, that we should be looking at. Are they being subjected to mental or physical abuse? Are they bruised? Do they have unexplained injuries? Or they give excuses for injuries that they just don't make sense, or they cause you to question, you know, how that could have actually happened. So those are some of the things that you might recognize with labor trafficking. A lot of the hotels, pardon me, hotels may be a prominent place for individuals who are subjected to labor trafficking. And again, not all are participating, and I think the majority of the hotels are not participating in these activities. But that is a location, just like farms and other service industries that you may find individuals who are being subjected to trafficking.
Okay, and anybody can ask the question, a victim of human trafficking.
I'm sorry, Ms. Vernita, could you repeat your question?
Yeah, anyone can answer this. Who is at risk of becoming a victim of human trafficking?
I would say there is people who are vulnerable in general.
Can you guys
Either
hear me?
yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This has been crazy today.
I think you can go ahead with your thought. I think they may have gotten kicked off.
Okay. Well, I'm not Angela Dudley. I'm Sabrina, but traffickers tend to look for vulnerable people. One thing we know from the child welfare is that a large percentage of children in the child welfare system are targets for traffickers because they prey on vulnerable people. Children between the ages of 12 and 14 are like the highest percentage of people being trafficked. But also people who are alienated from their community. They may not have strong family ties. They may be minorities. One of the highest percentages of people who are trafficked are minority kids, especially minority females. Black children, Black females are the highest percentage of trafficked individuals.
Yeah, I think you bring
Thank
up an
you.
excellent point. I think our communities are at most vulnerable for it here in these most recent years. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that everybody's at risk. It doesn't necessarily mean that you came from a poor background with a one-parent home. Everybody can be vulnerable for it. And that's what we're seeing in the growing trend across the country, that even more in affluent communities, in places where we would least expect, people have found themselves prey to human trafficking. Because in most cases, it's an elaborate scheme. It's not necessarily that you meet one person one day and fall prey to it. Often they lure and bait individuals into these situations over a period of time. So any of us are vulnerable. And I say any of us, not just females. I think we have a misconception as males sometimes to think that males are not involved in human trafficking, that this is just a female issue, that females are exploited, that their vulnerability are being exploited by these perpetrators. But often we find often that men are find themselves, or males find themselves at the center of this as well.
Well, my next question is, and anyone can answer. Do the victims always come from a low or poor income background?
I think Mr. Green touched on that. No, they're not always from low income backgrounds, but they do tend to be more vulnerable. I think traffickers kind of look for that because those folks are looking to, make some kind of economic opportunity. If somebody comes to you and says, I got this really great job I can line you up with, of course, somebody who's not making a living wage or who is trying to find employment, they're going to be interested. And so those are the kinds of folks that targeters do tend to target.
Sergeant Vibrett, could you educate the audience on how to report human trafficking, as far as how do we report it to law enforcement?
So in the Greenville area, if you're in the Greenville city limits, I'll just give you a generic overview. You would report it to the law enforcement agency having jurisdiction. If you live in the county, if you're in Ayden, or you're in, whatever municipality you happen to find yourself in, you just call your local law enforcement agency and you explain the circumstances, what you're seeing, and just ask law enforcement to look into this, that you suspect human trafficking. Give them the circumstances. Are you seeing juveniles that are involved in commercial sex acts? Have you received information about that, or whatever the circumstances you're finding? Just notify your local law enforcement, and they will follow up on it. And you can do that anonymously. You don't have to give your name. If you have information about a crime like that, this or any crime, you can just call your local law enforcement and share that information. That's more important than a lot of times than having your name.
So I have a question that anyone can answer. Do victims of human trafficking self-identify as a victim of crime? And sometimes when they're out and they're being trafficked, if they find themselves getting in trouble because their trafficker is having them to do different things, what happens, if they're charged and then eventually, well, Officer Viverett, you probably can answer that. What happens if they're charged and then how do you guys as law enforcement, if, you come to arrest me for a crime and I tell you, I break down and let you know that I've been trafficked, I have a trafficker or whatever, and, he or she made me do those things.
We look to protect the person who has been victimized by human trafficking. Our goal is not to prosecute. Are there instances where an individual may be charged? I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that happening, at least with our agency. We want to rescue that individual that's involved in human trafficking. We don't want to penalize them or victimize that individual further. Our goal is to get them to safety, to get them resources, to get them out of that environment, so that they can lead a better life.
And one more question for you, Officer Viverett. What are the resources? So if anyone is in your jurisdiction, what are some of the resources they have if they have found themselves been a victim to human trafficking?
Local law enforcement is the biggest. And I recognize that there's distrust. I recognize that if you don't have a relationship with an individual, it's hard to just to say, trust me. But that's what we want to do. That's why we want to build on. That's why we participate in forums like this, is we want to build that relationship with the community. We want you to reach out to us. If you're involved in this and you need help, come to us. We will team up with Project Fight through the Salvation Army. We will team up with other community partners to find you safe housing, to make sure that you receive those resources that you need just to survive. Remember that a lot of individuals, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry every year. You're talking about 65% of the individuals that are trafficked each year are trafficked for sexual purposes. 40.3 million individuals are trafficked or estimated to be trafficked, at least according to Project Fight. 30% of those individuals are minors. And I think, like you and I talked about, Ms. Vanita, and I think Miss Sabrina touched on it earlier. They have a need. An individual, regardless of your sex, regardless of your race, you have a need that is being met, or at least in your perception of it, a need is going to be met by these traffickers. Whether it's love, whether it's money, whether it's shelter, clothing, what have you. You fill in the blank. There is a perception that a need is going to be met, and that's why individuals are so vulnerable. There doesn't seem to be a demographic that plays in here. It's of all races, all sexes, and all ages, really. So the biggest thing I can say is just reach out to us. We will find you the resources to help you.
And I think to answer your question also, often they don't see themselves being a part of being a victim because of the need. There becomes a codependence to
Absolutely.
the ones that's violating them. You know, they're feeding them, they're housing them, they're clothing them, they're giving them often sometimes those basic necessities. And so there's a deep entrenched psychology that begins to manifest among the victims and those that are perpetrating it.
Also, a lot of domestic violence and sexual assault providers are now branching out to do services for trafficking victims as well. So, in addition to working with the police, a victim that's being trafficked can also turn to a domestic violence or sexual assault provider in their area who can connect them with services either locally or on a national level.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sabrina, for that information. I am gonna post, so if anybody is going through human trafficking, I did post the national 800 number. I also post, if you can't talk, you can text them, and I also post their website. So we're gonna keep that up as we, continue through the interview, because I believe that that is really important. If someone, is on and, they see this interview, they have some of the tools that they need to get some of the help. So as a parent, what will be some of the warning signs, of child trafficking to help to protect our children?
Miss Benita, this is C. Dwayne Hennett. I wouldn't necessarily say warning signs, but there's some things that you got to be aware of, especially in your environment. From my experience, as far as human trafficking, a lot of people are trafficked in cities that are heavy, are either big cities. They have sports teams. Transient cities like beach cities, and cities or towns that are close to highways, or internet or have international airports. You do have to worry about going into places like that because of the environment that it has. When I talk about transient business or transient people that comes in, that means people that come in and out of the city. They don't have planet roots there, but they're there for whatever event or specific purpose of it. A lot of the people that I talk to, I tell them, on this coast, I probably say, the biggest place would be Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach is high for transient business, high for human trafficking. It actually was at one point in time, I probably say about 2 years ago, the number one place for human trafficking. And that's because of so much transient business that came in and out of Myrtle Beach. And the population that it was so heavy populated during business hours that law enforcement wasn't focusing on, people coming in and out. Then, like I said, too, it had an international airport and it was right off of 95. So I wouldn't say necessarily warning signs, but I would say your environment that you're looking to be aware of.
Question. So What are three types of red flags or indicators that for human trafficking?
Is that for anyone to answer, or was that for a
Yes,
specific person?
anyone can answer.
Well, I think there's a disconnect. Like we mentioned earlier, you have the individual appears to be submissive. They appear to be dependent upon um, their decision making is left to a specific individual. There may be a disconnect from their family, friends, um, community organizations, even places that go to church. They are isolated, if you will, from others, except for those involved in the business of human trafficking or whatever service they may be providing. Um, in the case of minors, they may not be attending school. There may be a change in behavior. Um, we mentioned that they may have signs of not getting enough sleep because they're working extended hours because of that requirement being placed on them by their trafficker. So there's a lot of things that do not in and of themselves individually indicate human trafficking, but taken in totality, you may say maybe there's something here. Maybe this person is in danger or is being trafficked.
I think if we were to add to that's such awesome points that the officer gave. I think what it all boils down to with any abuser, typically the first thing that they try to take away is communication. And so when the officer is talking about isolation from family, isolation from the community, isolation from church, it's typically when you see them relying on communication from that one abuser. When you ask them, how can you contact them, how can you call them, oh, just call such and such phone, or just call them and let them know and they'll get in contact with me. And so that abuser really tries to dominate communication, because if they can isolate them and dominate the communication factor, they can dominate their message, they can dominate whether or not they're telling anybody about the abuse, whether or not they're telling about the operation, all of those things. They're very, very strict on that communication factor.
And that's true. And that's one of the things that we see in domestic violence, the power and control, um, that your abuser, the manipulator, has to have power and control over you. And once, if they feel like they're losing that, that's where you see the abuse. That's where you see, that when they feel like they're losing their control. So I truly get it. And so we do know that with trafficking, a lot of times they are branded. Officer Viverett, I know we spoke about that, but and I know you haven't, seen any specific, or you guys don't have any specific ones, but can we tell the audience a little bit about branding?
I would really like to hear from the other panelists. So after our conversation, Ms. Renita, I went and did some research and looked online, and you can see there are instances where individuals are branded or tattooed. Being tattooed is very, I don't want to say popular. That gives it a positive connotation, but it's prevalent. Maybe that's a better word. Even to the point of inside the individual's lips, their bottom lip, they'll tattoo inside there because it doesn't stand out. But there are other brands, whether it be mutilation with a knife or whether it be an actual brand where an individual who is being trafficked by a particular person will have a specific mark. But that again, and I apologize to the group, that's my limited knowledge on that, and I'm thirsty for the knowledge of others if someone can share.
Well, it is limited knowledge on everybody's part, because from what I've heard and from what I've talked to other people about, it's something new on the horizon, and it's new on the horizon because the market is, I hate to sound like this, but the market is flooded with, human traffickers. So, and it's kind of a business to where a human trafficker has its own identity, and they brand the people that they traffic, with their brand. I remember watching a documentary. It was a documentary and a movie. The name it was Nexus, and it was about this cult. They had about this cult, and it was supposed to be like a higher thinking, higher minded cult of people, and the leader of it had all the women branded with his name. They thought they were being branded with a symbol of intelligence or higher thinking, but it was just his name put together, his two initials put together. And it's also just for that power and control too as well. So whenever you see girls that are branded or tattooed, it's because of that. It's because of identity, it's because of marking, it's because of the marked territory or property from other human traffickers.
Anybody else want to elaborate?
Yeah, I think it was very eloquently said by our other panelists. It is a means of control, and as was forestated, it's an ever growing, evolving criminal enterprise. And I can't stress that more than anything. It's not a mom and pop one-off conversation. This is a highly elaborate, well thought out plan, and is it constantly evolving and developing criminal enterprise. So the tagging and the branding is a form of, as you mentioned, people within that industry being able to identify who you belong to, possibly what region of the country you come from, and so on and so forth. And so I think we have to be vigilant to that, because it is very reminiscent of slavery in past years, not just slavery in America, but slavery abroad. Tagging your property, the respect and honor among thieves, the respect and honor among the different slave owners or captors, that this is your property, I won't interfere in your property, so I'm tagging it, and so on and so forth. So as you get into the psychology of it, it is very in-depth, very scary, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's something that is very prevalent throughout this country.
So I know we talk about domestic violence, and we're talking about the human trafficking, and so I kind of want Miss Sabrina to come in and speak, because we always talk about the negative things that can happen, but sometimes as parents, as leaders, as people of the community, we need to express healthy relationships, things to look for in healthy relationships, things to look for in unhealthy relationships. And all of you can, chime in. But if, as we stated, with the labor trafficking and human trafficking, the child trafficking, everybody's looking for a gain, and so if I'm not taught what a healthy relationship is, and somebody come out and say, well, hey, let me show you love by buying you this, but you have to do XYZ, I'm gonna think it's okay. And the truth be told, a lot of things that the youth are seeing in their homes, it may look like it's okay. So let's talk to the audience, Miss Sabrina, a little bit, and you men can chime in too, because we want to hear the male perspective of a healthy relationship. But Miss Sabrina, can we take it there just for a little bit?
Yeah. There actually is an overlap between domestic violence and human trafficking. If you look at the power and control wheel, which is a tool we use to explain those dynamics to survivors, the methods that domestic violence perpetrators and that human traffickers use are very, very similar to get that emotional and mental control over their victim, not just the physical. Because if you got the mind and heart, the physical will follow. And you don't always have to use violence to get that person to do what you want them to do. I would say for domestic violence can start in the home. Even as a child, if you're growing up in a family where you see a lot of conflict between the partners, the parents, you kind of internalize that as a kid. And so you think that's the norm, to yell, to throw things, to use the silent treatment, to withhold finances, all of those negative things that happen. And you kind of say, okay, well, mommy and daddy say they love each other, and this is how their relationship goes. So this must be what a relationship is supposed to look like. And so as those kids grow up and start dating, they begin to manifest those same behaviors in their relationship. For young men who grow up in abusive households, they may tend to become abusive in their dating relationships. They're very jealous. They're very controlling. They want to monitor their partner all the time. For young girls who grow up in families where there's a lot of domestic violence or a lot of conflict, being submissive to your partner, thinking that jealousy is a show of love, and being the one who does everything to keep the relationship going. This is what they internalize, and so this is what they do. And children, they learn what they see, and so if that's all you've ever known, then that's what you do. I think in teaching our kids about healthy relationships, we have to start at the bottom. I mean, there has to be trust. There has to be mutual respect, not just for one partner to the other, but for both partners showing equal respect for their roles and the strengths that they bring to the relationship. And we have to start teaching our kids young. Don't wait until they're dating age to start talking about domestic violence. Teach them, when they're old enough to talk, that, we don't do certain things. You don't hit, you don't push, you don't use violence to get your way. Use your words, because as you model those healthy things, your children internalize that too. And that's what they take into their relationships. The best way to prevent domestic violence in the home is to model healthy dynamics between partners and between parents and children.
And would any of you want to elaborate?
Yeah.
What was the question again, Vanita?
We was talking about healthy relationships. We also talking about.
That's what I thought. Okay. So healthy relationships, and like Miss Sabrina said, that as parents, children need to have a good example of what a healthy relationship is in the home. Our first relationship starts with our parents. If you're a boy, your first relationship with the opposite sex starts with your mother, as being an example of what you view your mate is supposed to be, or what you want your mate supposed to be. And as a father, as a female child in the home, your first example is of a relationship is with your father. Now, when it becomes to absentee parents on both sides, you run into that where a parent is absent. So they don't have that example of what a healthy relationship is, or what a healthy example is from that. So now they're leaning on their own understanding, or the understanding from their friends, or the understanding of what's the next step. There could be a boyfriend that's in the home, or it could be an abusive boyfriend that's in the home, or it could be abusive, mother, girlfriend that's in the home. So when we're looking at healthy relationships as parents, we need to provide the best example of it, because it's not just a healthy relationship doesn't just do us any good. It does our children good, and also does our grandchildren as well, because these things are learned behavior. Mm-hmm. If you have learned behavior that's bad, it only trickles down to other generations as well. So the example of a good and healthy relationship is so vital and important, especially in our community. I'll say that where stereotypes are, let me see, how can I say it? Stereotypes are put in places about absentee fathers or not good parenting in our community. It's so important that there are so many good examples that are out there for healthy relationships, and for other people, not just in your home to see, but just other people in your community to see as well.
I think as it relates to healthy relationships, you don't know what's healthy sometimes when you're in an unhealthy situation, if that's your norm. And so we talk about the sociological construct of it. From a sociological perspective, if you grow up in a family that you feel that is loving, you don't necessarily know how toxic it is until you've been aware of it through either education or seeing other relationships and other models. And I think that's where the problem is. It was so amazing how Miss Sabrina talked about even the silent treatment in a home being a use of manipulation and a use of of abuse. Often we don't even look at it that way. We look at that as just somebody just not talking. And so some of these behaviors are not always hitting somebody upside the head, cursing them out. Sometimes it's other forms of manipulation, other forms of withholding from finances, different things that will scar children, will have a dramatic impact and an effect on how they view relationships. And this is one thing that I noticed also. I heard this from a victim that I had the opportunity to counsel within the church confines, that because of the loss of power from sexual abuse and domestic abuse, she became promiscuous as a form of gaining that power back because she was molested, she was raped several times. So instead of it being taken from her, she just started giving it as a form of, instead of you taking it, I'm just going to be promiscuous. That way I hold the power. I control when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And so there's a lot of deeply entrenched things that surface because of some of these abuses, that we often wonder, how can somebody be a prostitute? How can they be pimped? How can somebody end up in this particular predicament and just allow this to happen to them? Often, as you mentioned, it starts in those relationships and it spawns into other aspects and behaviors through those experiences. And that's what I've seen. It's just an amazing thing to see.
Um, it's not often that I'm speechless,
Yeah,
but
I am.
I got real speechless right now.
Yeah.
Um, because you can plan all day what you're gonna say, but then there are other things, and getting questions. Um, Mr. Hannett, you have any questions?
Um, I don't know if these questions have been answered yet. Um, as far as everybody's experience with human trafficking. No, I don't have any. I don't have any questions.
So, well, we know Officer Viverett, his communication is, on that is limited to what he can speak about. But if we want to, um, I guess, Mr. Green, the reason I got speechless because I'm that girl. I was introduced to domestic violence from my first husband, and I lost a son through it. Um, and it just introduced me to other things. Even though I wasn't trafficked, I took control and I experimented. So I'm grateful that I'm still here. That God spared me with, no lifelong diseases or anything like that. But I was that person. And I guess that's why that made me speechless. Um,
Let me first pause and say, let me applaud you for your courage, for even having a forum like this, and your courage for even be able to grow from that, heal from that, and be able to talk about it. One thing that I learned is one of the first signs of growth and healing is being able to talk about it.
Mhm.
Often when you experience that trauma, that abuse, we often suppress our feelings and we can't talk about it. And so the fact that you can talk about it, you can share, and you can pour into others is just amazing to me. And so I wanted to digress and just commend you and applaud you for how heroic and how courageous that is to be able to do that.
And honestly, it's not easy. It's not easy, but I always say that if my story can help one, you know, I've done a lot. And to have an awesome team, awesome team to support, you know, and doing this is healing for myself as well. Um, so, but this could be, a little touchy. I do have a couple of other questions, and I'm glad Miss Sabrina hit on, abuse not always being physical.
Mhm.
We talk about various forms of abuse on our panels. We talk about the domestic violence. We talk about the financial abuse. We talk about the spiritual abuse, the rape. We talk about all of it. Um, we have to educate because if not, people will just be walking around. And that's why I am so happy that Officer Viverett, also came on because a lot of times in our communities, we're taught that law enforcement don't care. They're not going to participate in a forum. They're not going to educate us. We just another. I mean, and I'm the one to put it out. We're just another victim. You know what I mean? We're just another number. We're just another statistic. So we commend you as well for coming on, being a part of this round table because we need it. We need to talk about it. And a lot of people didn't know what trafficking was. Um, we hear people say, "Oh, well, she wanted it." A child that a younger person. How grown men making decisions to be with children.
Mhm.
Oh well, what you dress her in. How does that give him the okay? And I'm not going to put it all on him either.
Right.
You know, we got women
They are female traffickers. Yeah.
that are
Right.
traffickers as well. So there's no particular who decides, but who gives someone the right to take an innocent child and introduce them to child trafficking, introduce them to human trafficking, introduce them to sex. It's not fair to anybody that's involved.
That's true.
That is very true.
Mr. Hennett?
Exactly right. And again, I thank you. I'm just happy that I could be part of this. Um, there's a lot of different things. Domestic violence, if there's a history of domestic violence, if there's a history of drug and alcohol abuse, um, if there's a history of economic need, if there's a history of um, juveniles running away, being involved in the juvenile justice system, all of these make an individual more vulnerable to being trafficked, being in the system, if you will. Um, we talked about our children, like we talked about all along. Kids, there's a need, whether it's love, whether it's money, shelter, whatever the case may, food. A lot of our kids go hungry. That to me is difficult to even think about. How in the most prosperous nation in the world can our kids go to school and that be the only meal they eat? Um, So they are searching for, you know, something better. They are reached out to by predators online. Are we involved in our kids' conversations online? Are we recognizing who they're talking with? If we don't know who they're talking with, are we asking those difficult questions? And then explaining, having a conversation, not just don't talk with this person, but well, who is this? How do you know this person? Um, can I meet them? Have you ever met them? Be polite to people online, but a person that friends you, quote unquote, may not be your friend. And just having these conversations with our kids, particularly, um, about what love is, about what a a positive relationship is with the opposite sex, with our peers, and just educating our family and our friends, about what's acceptable, what's expected. Um, I that's what's most important.
Yeah, I just want to jump in, and I agree with Sergeant Viverette. It's really important to talk with your kids about sex, about relationships, about their bodies. When you're old enough to understand, you can't wait until the child is 10, 11, 12 to have those conversations, because they're already having those conversations at that age. They're talking with their friends, they're talking with their classmates, they're picking up stuff from media. And so when your kids are old enough, you have to have age appropriate conversations with them about their body belonging to them, and that nobody has a right to touch them without their permission. And if someone does touch them without their permission, that they're supposed to tell somebody. About not keeping secrets from mommy and daddy, because that's one of the big things that traffickers and pedophiles use, is developing this relationship with the child that excludes everyone else. And so the child feels like this person is the only one who cares about me. And it's okay to do these things and to keep secrets because we have this relationship. And so you have to, talk to your child about not having secrets from mommy and daddy, because that's one of the things that traffickers will use, or that pedophiles will use. They will try to develop those relationships with the child. They also try to develop a relationship with the parent or the caregiver, so that they're like building up this sense of trust and confidence in that pedophile. And then once they've developed that level of trust, they'll begin to do things. And at that point, the child and the parent are, secure that this person, is a good person. They mean my child well. It's okay for me to let them go, on an overnight trip, or, a shopping trip, or go out of town, because they develop this trusting relationship. And the person may be somebody that they have an affiliation with. It could be a teacher, it could be a coach, it could be somebody from church, it could be a family friend, it could even be another child, an older child. And so they're not necessarily thinking that this person means their child ill, but you have to be really careful. You have to look at the behavior to make sure that it lines up with what they say, and that your child is not afraid to talk with you. And if by chance you do find out that there's something going on, please don't blame the child. The child is just being a child. But you have to be able to have those conversations with your child before they put in that situation.
Wow, Miss Sabrina is just on it. She is just on it. And as she spoke, it brought to my mind something that is also pervasive, is shame, victims' shame. Uh, that's why that communication that Mr. Brenda was talking about, given that open communication where young people or whoever is the victim can talk and feel that trust and be able to be aware of the fact that there are people that we can talk about, because there is often shame that resides in a victim that will keep them in a situation longer than they expected to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And because they feel as though I've done these acts, I've committed these things, they take ownership on it without realizing that they were the victim. And often that shame will keep them to suppress it, number one, their feelings, suppress it as far as letting anyone know of the abuse, and just overall stay in a condition longer than necessary.
Yeah.
And if I can add to that, how we react as parents when we have those conversations when they're young, when our kids are young, and it's something very minor, or to them it's the end of the world. But how we react, are we convicting? Are we criticizing? Or are we loving, caring, edifying, trying to encourage our youth? Um, how we react in those early conversations will affect whether or not they will come to us in their teenage years when something very serious is going on, and they need that adult help, that loving parent to intervene on their behalf. If we mess it up when they're young, they're not coming to us when they're older.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just want to chime in too, just to say about Miss Sabrina that what she's talking about is grooming. That's that's the correct name for everything that she just laid out so beautifully is grooming. And one thing that stuck out in my mind is that she said, other children. Other children are used to groom other children as well by abusers. So whenever we worry about stuff, we worry about grooming habits from just not adults or just not family friends or church leaders and stuff like that. But you also need to worry about grooming habits from other children as well. Not all goes back into having a healthy relationship, having a healthy understanding of what it is to be treated right and knowing your value.
That was one of the biggest things that Jeffrey Epstein was accused of having that grooming, having that
Oh,
baiting.
because that's like number one tool for pedophiles and abusers and sex traffickers and stuff like that is building that bond, building that relationship, building that somewhat trust. When I think of human trafficking, the main thing that sticks out in my mind is Stockholm syndrome. And for everybody that don't know what Stockholm syndrome is, it is when you develop a bond with your captors or abusers. But it's a psychological bond that you've been abused and manipulated so much that you start to defend and start to accept who your captors are.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the ones who are keeping you or trying to hurt you. It's the outside world.
Right.
Yeah. And it's the same dynamic with domestic violence. Trauma
Exactly.
bonding, where you bonding with your abuser. It's the same mentality. And you're so identified with that person, you can't even imagine what your life would be like without that person in it. And even though you're so in so much pain emotionally and mentally, you still can't quite cut off that tie because they're so intermeshed with you.
I do have a question for everyone else. If y'all, can I ask a question, Ms. Renita?
Yeah, go ahead.
For everybody else on the panel, does anyone else have any experience with human trafficking other than for sex work?
I have not. We have a detective that works with our agency, that is when we come across something that we believe to be human trafficking, whether it be sexual human trafficking or labor human trafficking, we go to that individual. But I don't have any experience with labor human trafficking.
I don't.
I've only had limited experience, just one instance of it, knowing it within a gentleman, and that's what really heightened my attention to it because it wasn't a teenage person, it was an older person, and to see that really brought a perspective to me that wow, this ain't something that you just see among kids or children. This wasn't an abduction. This was something that was more so used because of the safety of the family. Um, that was used the manipulation of the safety of the family member was in need because of health issue, and it was promises made of being able to provide health care, being able to provide a sustainable income to help sustain a family member while they were ill terminally, and so they were forced into some labor. Um, that really did not pan out, of course, and they were stuck for a couple years just under the auspice of trying to work to be able to provide health care and money to send back to their family.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to go when I asked the question, because when we talk about human trafficking, everybody knows, the sex workers, human trafficking. But if we want to make the public aware of human trafficking, let's make them aware of all of it. Like, there's human trafficking for servitude. Servitude as far as, slave labor, or, indentured servant. Where someone may be brought into this country or brought into our state for domestic work, and like I said, it's just not about sex workers and stuff like that, because we do have a heavy population, and I'll say it like this too, that some people are brought into this country from other countries, other Hispanic countries, as well as one that's very populated with this area, for indentured servants, for housekeepers, babysitters. And there's also, human trafficking for, let me see, black market organ trafficking. So there are people trafficked just for your organs too, as well. And then, like I said, the age range, I mean, it's human trafficking is $1 million industry.
$1 billion.
$1 billion, yeah. Put in more words than that. $1 billion industry. So when we think about all the many ways that you can traffic, or the many reasons that we traffic humans, let's take in consideration that everybody is a risk. Everybody is a risk. There are some demographics that are more at risk than others, but everybody can be at risk. You can be put into human trafficking as a 45 or 42-year-old person. You could be put in a human trafficking situation being a child of 2, or being a child of 12. So the seriousness of human trafficking plays into it, that everybody's at risk.
Wow.
That's interesting. So I have a question. So a lot of young kids like to use Instagram and TikTok. I have a 10-year-old, but I don't allow him on social media. But what would be the age appropriate, for young kids to be on Instagram, even though, some parents monitor their kids and some parents don't monitor their kids?
I'll answer this from a youth pastor perspective.
Okay.
I don't think it's age appropriate, honestly, until they become an adult. And I may be a little old fashioned on some of that, partly because kids have a good way of creating ghost accounts. So
Right.
parents really don't know the accounts that they have. They have the one that's nice that parents can look at and monitor. They'll say, I'm looking at that social media, but then their kids have ghost accounts as well. And the reason why I say it's not necessarily age appropriate until they become an adult is not just solely on the content that is available, but what I like to call access. It immediately gives access to predators to that child. And so I'm always aware and leery. And I know we live in a technology generation where it's kind of hard to parent without giving your kids some form of communication to reach out to you, to be able to call, be able to text you when they need you. But you have to really be on guard with that social media, because it's ever evolving. As a parent, when you think you've mastered Instagram, they're on Snapchat. When you think you've mastered Snapchat, they're on TikTok. When you think you've mastered TikTok, they're on something else that you don't even know that they're only aware of. And so it's constantly evolving, and the biggest fear is just access. It's that access of having someone that they can't necessarily see the danger, at that age, because often as adults, sometimes we are oblivious to danger. Sometimes we're not as aware of our surroundings. How many times has it been when you are put in peril and you don't know until after the fact? Being an adult, I'll never forget. Really quickly, I'll never forget. I sat literally right beside Ray Caruth, right maybe 3 days before he had arguably committed murder or put a hit out on Sharika Adams to be killed. And I never would have thought, sitting there 2 days, 3 days prior, that I was sitting beside a murderer or sitting beside a person that was capable of plotting a murder of a pregnant woman. And so often we're in peril. Often we don't know who we're around, and sometimes we can be too trusting of people, family members included, uh, authority figures included, and we can put our kids in peril and say, oh, they're just talking to this person, or oh, they're just online with this person, and so it's the access that frightens me more than anything.
Yeah. I want to piggyback on what Mr. Green said. And it's not just social media like TikTok and Snapchat and those type medias, like gaming systems as well. Fortnite and these other group game type things are big targets for predators and traffickers. They look on because they know their kids participating. So I think you have to be really vigilant about monitoring your child's social media use and their game use. Get those parental controls on there so that they can't just go in without your knowledge. If it's a family phone, then you got the access. You can go in there and shut that thing down if you want to. Don't let your child have their own independent line. Make sure it's a family plan, that type of thing, so that you always have a way of cutting off that access if it becomes an issue. But also having those conversations, just like you would talk to your child about, a physical person that you were leery of. You have to have those talks about online safety as well, and that there are people out there who pretend to be somebody that they're not, in order to snare you in. And so you have to be really honest about that, and encourage your child to communicate with you. And of course, kids get to a certain age, they think their parents are idiots and they don't know anything. But still, for the most part, they may have a good relationship with you. But if they can't talk to you, encourage them to talk to another adult that they do trust, and let them know that even if something were to happen and they were to get caught up in something, that you're always going to love them, that you're not going to be angry with them, and you're not going to penalize them, because that's the thing that keeps kids from talking, is the fear of that they're going to lose their parents' love and respect.
I want to piggyback off what you said too, Miss Sabrina. I'll give an example. My wife always used to. She was always real skittish about the social media and the internet. She has a degree in IT, and she worked pretty much along with chat rooms and stuff like that, and how people were on the internet. And she would do stuff like this. And for parents that's out there, if your child wants to be on social media, she had to have the password to it. She had to have the password to your social media account. Not only did she have to have the password to your social media account, she also created about 5 dummy accounts that friended her daughter, that friended the kids as well. So that's a good way to keep in contact, and monitor what's on your child's page. Like I said, my wife was always worried about, so she always had, passwords. She always was able to go into their accounts and see what was going on. And like I said, she was always able to monitor on the other side. Now with the, growing, ever evolving social media platforms that's out there, now it's become even harder to monitor. Like, even though your child has a social media account, she may have 2 or 3 social media accounts. So you might want to do a scrub of the computer to see what access they've had. You might want to see, a scrub of the internet to see, what social media, your name of your daughter or your children's name they've been under, that they've used. I know with Instagram, there is another version of Instagram that allows them to have, different accounts under different names. But for Instagram itself, it's hard to monitor, their progress or their status on Instagram, because unless they have a private account, anybody can follow them. Anybody can monitor, their account. So you might want to keep. So for parents that's out there, you might want to, if you want your kids to have Instagram or other social media accounts, you might want to follow those steps into it. Make them have private accounts. Give them have access to their accounts. Make sure that they give you the password. Make dummy accounts as well, and also just go through and just type in their name and see if they have any of the accounts that's open.
Can I add this also? If they're with family members, trusted family members like grandparents, aunts, and uncles, make them aware of your parameters as well. Because my kids, they got very slick with, when I get with grandma and granddad, I can get on grandma's iPad because grandma don't know all the technology. And so I had to make my parents aware of, they're not allowed to do this. They're not allowed to do that. If they are allowed, these are the hours that they're allowed to do it. Just making them aware of those parameters as well, just so that everybody in the whole community, the whole family system can kind of keep an eye on, what's going on.
So let me piggyback just a couple off a couple of you. I am an IT major, so I don't allow my nieces, my nephews, any of them to have social media. The reason being Snapchat. A lot of people are not aware, but the children will sign up and go on Snapchat. Snapchat takes you directly to the location where they are. If you have a tech savvy person, it will take you directly. It will ping in directly where you are. I have an issue with that. TikTok was another one. When it first came out, everybody was so excited about it, and any social media has its pros and its cons. But for children under the age of 18, they really don't need it. TikTok is another one that takes you, it'll ping you in where that person is. So we are Fortnite. I don't like the game. We are giving our children technology that can bring predators right to our home. Mm-hmm. And if we're not tech savvy, we're opening our children up for danger. And then when something happened, I didn't know. So sometimes what I say to a lot of my friends is, your children don't have to fit in where everybody else is. We want to protect ours. Yep. My little sister is 10. She wanted a phone. No, I'm against her having a phone. Hello. Wherever you go, we gotta take you. I got a phone. When she's on her iPad or whatever, it's someone there to monitor. So as parents, we do have a responsibility. And if we cannot monitor them, they don't need to have it. That's right. Absolutely. Another thing is, even at a young age, we taught my sister her body parts. We got to stop giving these cute names. Because when they come talk to you and say, somebody touched my cookie, you thinking they went in the cookie jar and got all the cookies. And it has nothing to do with that. They're actually talking about their body. Somebody touched it. And as Officer Viverett said, how we react is very important. Because if we are over extreme and we blame them, they're never going to come back. But we have a responsibility as parents, as people in the community, as leaders, to teach them, one, the correct name for their body parts. Yep. Because if we don't, and they come talk to us and we're busy, We thinking they talking about maybe something in the kitchen. It has nothing to do with it. They're trying to tell you that somebody has touched them inappropriately, but they're calling it what you called it. So that's what I would say to anybody that's watching. Let's educate our children. Let's give them the proper name. Let's not be our children's friends, but let's educate them on why. It, I mean, we've all been there before. I know if I was younger, my mom would say, "Oh, I can't have Snapchat," but she gave me a phone, baby. I'm gonna have Snapchat. I'm gonna have it those things. So sometimes we have to limit just to protect, and that's what this time is about: protecting our children. And we really need to do our part in helping to protect our children.
Mhm. Ms. Renita, I like what you said about using the proper words for body parts. That is so important because the child needs to know that there's nothing shameful about their body. And that they have a right to their own body. Their body belongs to them, and nobody has a right to touch it without their permission. A lot of times, we as adults encourage kids to hug people or kiss people when they really don't want to. We need to stop doing that. We need to respect the child's feeling that I don't want to hug this person. I don't want to touch this person. For whatever reason, they don't want to. They don't want to. Don't make them do that. Because when you press a child to do things like that against their will, it makes them believe that their instincts are not right. And so then when somebody does approach them for a negative purpose, they're not confident enough to say, don't do that, or I don't like that. And then the other thing I want to say is if your child does disclose something like that to you, just receive that in the spirit of love. Don't act angry. Don't act shocked. And encourage them, let them know that no matter what, I love you and I'm here to support you. Don't act like you don't believe them, because that's devastating, for a child to get up the courage to say, somebody touched me or somebody did this to me, and then to not be believed. That's devastating.
That's good stuff.
I'm going to piggyback off of what Miss Sabrina just said. So when I probably was like a teenager or whatever, my uncle would ask me for a hug. And then every time I would push him away. And he recently asked me as an adult, like, why wouldn't you hug me? And I really didn't ever talk about it, but I didn't let him hug me or any other adult, because being touched by a family member will cause you to just shut down and not want someone, to hug you or anything. So I'm very, very cautious with my two boys. Like I make sure that I tell them that, if someone touches them inappropriate, let me know immediately. That way they don't be a statistic and be like, they got to hold in what someone has done to them. But, in the doctor's office, they say good touch, bad touch. But I always let them know, like, just let me know. You can talk to me, because some parents, they won't talk to their kid. They won't talk to their kids freely, and the children are just shut down.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And another thing is, I have daughters. I've never allowed my daughters to sit on people's laps.
Mm-mm.
Okay? Well, we don't do that. We could shake your hand and we could keep it moving. But sitting on laps, we don't do. So it's some things, like I said, as parents. And a lot of mine, I will say I am an open book. Trust. I don't trust people. When you have been through traumatic, life-changing things, your perspectives are completely different, and so for me, I think of all the possible things that can happen by sitting on laps.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
So, anybody else want to elaborate on anything dealing with trafficking, domestic violence, protecting our children?
As it relates to the domestic violence piece, I think we have to take it a lot more seriously and realize that it's not something that only affects the here and now, that it can affect generations to come. My family was affected by it. My grandfather murdered my grandmother when my mom was about 14, 15 years old. And that one day changed her life forever because she lost her mother and her father all in one day. The father went to jail, mother died, her family was dispersed, all of her siblings were dispersed throughout different family members. And it really took a toll on her emotionally. She had several suicide attempts, you name it, even spilling over into her getting married to my father, and I'm the first child. There were times that there were suicidal episodes where she contemplating killing herself as well as the family, all because of the domestic violence that she had witnessed as a child. So often we think of just the psychological toll on just that one victim, but often it really it affects the entire family structure. And so I admonish anyone that is going through that to seek the proper help, seek the proper counseling. That's why I'm so grateful. I'm not one of those religious leaders that believe that we should just rest solely on the church. I think God gives us these resources like social workers, like our law enforcement, like mental health professionals. I see those as assets that I love to see this partnership, this marriage of faith and community where we can provide those resources for individuals that are dealing with these issues and come out. And so my mom was able to come out on the bright side of that, having now written two books, When Love Hurts and When Love Heals, writing about her experience, how she went through that process, and how, through faith and through mental health professionals and various other things, through proper health and eating habits, was allowed her to get over that depression, get over that guilt, get over those things that kept her suppressed, what I like to call in arrested development. She found herself arrested in that 13, 14-year old trauma at the age of 30, at the age of 40, at the age of 50, still stuck in that place. And so I'm just prayerful that somebody listening to this broadcast is hearing these messages loud and clear, whether you're in domestic violence or going through human trafficking, that you can find some healing, some peace, some deliverance, and some solace in knowing that you do have a community of people that want to help and want to assist.
I thank you for that. I really appreciate you saying that as well. We have a child trauma advocate here at the agency, Miss Braswell, Denise Williams Braswell, and we only in the last 5 years. I said I've been with the agency 27 years in law enforcement. Only in the last 5 years has the term adverse childhood experiences (ACEs) or the idea of child trauma come to light. Had no idea. Hadn't even given that a second thought. Knew that we dealt with things all along in our lives, but these young people who see the things like you or your mother witnessed at a young age, it could be something that terrible, or it could be something else that's traumatic to them. It could be mom and dad fighting. It could be a variety of other things. Having a friend commit suicide, the death of a loved one, you name it. And these adverse childhood experiences as part of life can affect that child. And as it did with Mr. Green's mother, you could see immediate changes. So note changes in your child's behavior. They're 7, 8 years old. They've never had a problem wetting the bed. Are they now wetting the bed? Are they acting out? Are they truant from school? What changes in behavior are you seeing? And that may be enough of a red flag that if we're paying attention and we're watching, and we get busy with life, I get it. But if we're in tune with our kids, we can address those those childhood experiences, those adverse childhood experiences early on in their lives, to help them so that they continue to heal and grow across their lifetime. So, Roger, I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you for that.
For sure. Absolutely.
And what we also need to realize too is as parents, it's a good, hence the name of it takes a village. It does take a village to, make sure a child is properly taken care of, because it does have a trickle down effect, and then also linking as well. As parents, we're supposed to want to have the best environment for our children. I think back, of everything that we talked about today, how everything is linked and all, like I said, has a trickle down. I mean, if you have a child that's grown up in a domestic violence, home, it makes them more susceptible for other things. It makes them more susceptible for mental health issues. It makes them more susceptible to social issues. They make them more susceptible to other things like what we talked about today, like human trafficking. The reason why, some people are trafficked is because they don't have a stable home. Sometimes they don't have a stable home because their home is a domestic violence household where their parents are always fighting, or the mother has, a father that's coming in and out, or a father that comes in and out. It makes an unstable home for a child to be in. So the child doesn't want to be there, so they leave, or either go to someone else's home that they might feel, that they might think is, that they can help them. Like I said, I don't know if anybody's talked about, but like I said, numbers show that, when it comes to human trafficking, the biggest demographics are runaways. Runaways are running away from an abusive home or unstable home. So, like I said, of all the things that we talk about today, these are all linkable, all have a trickle down effect to it. So providing the best environment is important, imperative to the welfare of children or children in our community.
I just want to piggyback on what Dwayne was saying. It does take a village. The title of this program is "It Takes a Village." As parents, there's no shame in admitting we don't know everything. Kids do not come with an instruction manual. And sometimes we need a little help. So if you need to talk to someone else, if you need a counselor, or if you need, to have your child go to a counselor, or, another adult that you trust, your pastor, someone to help you find the resources that you need, then there's no shame in doing that. Because we have to stop, holding on to our pride and think about what's going to be the best thing for the kids. And what Sergeant Viverette said was really great about the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. I worked in the criminal justice system for like 20 years before I became a social worker. I never heard of the ACEs study or ACEs until I got to graduate school. And I started learning, that was my master's research project, was on adverse childhood experiences. And so learning how those things that happen to you in childhood impact you as you go into adulthood if they're not addressed. I would venture to say a huge percentage of the children who are in juvenile justice right now, or in child welfare right now, or adults that are in the justice system now, are those children who experienced adverse childhood experiences, and it was never recognized because we just didn't know. And so as a society, we need to find out, how these things impact us. I think statistically it's been found that about 2/3 of all adults have experienced at least one adverse experience in their lifetime. And if that's like 2/3 of the population. That's a huge number. And everybody's adverse experiences are not the same, but they impact people in the same way. And so when we recognize that, we can stop saying what's wrong with that person, and we start asking what happened to that person. And it gives a whole different perspective in how you approach problems.
I got to use that. That's good. That's good stuff.
That's real good
Yeah, it
information.
was. Yeah.
So we have pretty much covered, we pretty much covered everything when it's dealing with domestic violence, human trafficking, child trafficking. labor trafficking, sex trafficking, what to do if we recognize it, how to contact our local police department, um, what a healthy relationship is, and how it takes a village. It takes talks like these, to let people know it's okay to seek help. It's okay if you need help. We're here. You know, we've pretty much talked about everything, protecting our children. So if any of the panel have any final says that they want to say, now is the time.
Well, again, I just want to thank you for the forum. I would ask, if you will, before we go, if you'll put that number up there again. And I would also refer people to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children project fight with the Salvation Army. If you're out there and you need help, you can reach out to the Greenville Police Department at 329-4300. You can reach out to Real Crisis if you're in crisis and you need assistance. You can reach out to them as well. But again, just thank you all and thank the panelists for joining us today.
I just want to say to all the listeners and to the parents that's out there for this programming, just make sure that you're aware of what your environment that your child is in. This panel should have been an experience for everybody to know that you are closer to human trafficking than you think. You are closer to your child is closer to being around a pedophile than you think. All it takes is one computer. All it takes is one cell phone. You are closer to your child being kidnapped, taken from you than you think. So I just want to let all the parents know, just be aware of your child's surrounding, not just, what they're surrounded by, but who they are surrounded by. Also, look at the people that's in their environment. Look at the people that's in their home or school or even work. If you have teenagers, be considerate of all those points. Because, like I said, it's for a child to be taken, it's all it takes is just one thing sometimes. So just be aware of your environment.
That's good. I just want to say thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this. Community awareness is a big piece of prevention. And my motto is prevention is better than intervention. It is much easier to avoid a problem than it is to come in and try to solve a problem after something happens. And so having forums like this where we can talk about community issues and raise awareness among people and just get them to talk about those hard issues in their households makes a big difference. So thank you.
I'd like to echo what my other panelists said. I'm very humbled to have the opportunity to sit on this panel. I only had two main objectives today from this panel. Number one is to learn, and number two is to help spread awareness. And both of those were definitely achieved. I wasn't coming on here as an expert. I wanted to be a part of a think tank, a part of a group of individuals that can share and collaborate information. And I'm telling you, I've grown 10 extra feet today just listening to the wealth of knowledge that these great panelists, as well as the moderators, have shared. And so I just want to echo what they said. This is just amazing. I think prevention is very, very key. It's something that can keep us from a lot of the ills and a lot of the trying to repair the breach after the fact. And so I'm very, very excited about this, and I'll take a lot of this information and share it with partners in the community that I work with as well. So thank you.
On behalf of the organization, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for taking time out of your morning, especially a Saturday morning, to come on to help spread awareness. So much was learned here today. Mr. Green, after we finish this broadcast, if you will pin your mom's books under here for
Okay.
those, I know I want to purchase, but if you will pin that information under here, also the information that you gave us, Officer Viverett, I will pin up here under here for the numbers for Real Crisis, the Project Fight information, and also if they're in Greenville in the city limits, I'll pin Greenville Police Department and the Sheriff Department's information. On the post as well. It was very educational for me, emotional. But as we stated, it takes a village to protect our children, and they need to know that people from all walks of life are here. All you have to do is not be ashamed. Just open up and just let us know we're here to help. Also, to the viewers that's listening, even if you didn't post your comments or your questions, if you'll send them to me, I will definitely get the answers for you and give you the answers that's given to me if I do not have them. But again, I want to say thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're in a human trafficking situation, I do have the number already posted. You can contact them at 1-888-373-7888. You can also text them at 233-733 and just text help. If you need to go to their website, it's humantrafficking.org. If you don't want to reach out to them directly, you can reach out to us. It's survivorswithatestimony.org. And we'll be able to help you get the information that you need. So again, thank you to the panel, and you all have an amazing day.
Thank you. You as well.